This is On Mind with Andrew Archer. Today our guest is Angel Uribe, and we'll be talking about her business Stages of Change. I just want to begin with a brief bio for you, Angel. She has been a licensed alcohol and drug counselor for over 25 years. So you started when you were about 5 years old. Dedicated to advancing chemical and behavioral health. You're the owner of Stages of Change, and you specialize in a unique blend of substance abuse interventions and moderation management. This is not an abstinence-only kind of model. We'll be talking about that. So tools to manage and potentially reduce alcohol consumption when necessary. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. We know each other from our days at the Profinium building.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I was in a little shoebox office to the side, so we had some fun conversations and actually a little bit of clinical, discussion about mutual patients and that kind of thing. So maybe just to start, can you give the audience a little bit of your background, kind of story, how you got interested in this field and how you kind of got to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, it's so funny because thinking like 25 years in, that's a long, the story is getting longer and longer as I go. But just real quickly, I actually started off in the field of probation work. So I started as a juvenile probation officer. And to be honest, if I'm going to say where did I actually get my training and education, it was in those 4 years, right? Yeah. So I started in that work because, that was the way at that time that I thought that I could affect change and help people and help our communities and society. And after, 4 years of that, I worked with adults who were coming out of prison. And I did that for like 4.5 years. And the entire time that I did that work, there was something in the back of my mind going, I need to be upstream. This is so far downstream. Like when we're waiting until people's lives are becoming unmanageable or they've completely lost everything to jump in and try to give services, we've just waited too long. And so after about almost 9 years, I moved over into therapeutic intervention. So I started doing treatment programming, substance abuse treatment programming for a local place around the area here. And I enjoyed that more, but I still was feeling like we're waiting too long. There's something we can do, that can help them before they need so much help.
Right, and that's kind of emphasized on your website, right? Just because you're coming in for an assessment doesn't mean you have a drug problem, and it's really more proactive.
Yeah, let's look at the totality of your situation, and let's look at where are the strengths in your life, where are the things that are protective in nature, and then where do we take those areas of vulnerability and how can we support those areas until you can get a footing and start to feel that sense of having the power back to make choices that are in your higher and better interest. And so, even in that environment, I was working as a treatment counselor, I was given an opportunity to teach education classes, for someone who was coming through on like a DUI situation. And it was like something just clicked in me because I recognized, I'm like, this is the place that we need to be, is here at the very first sign of something going on, right? And
the
so
education kind of became your wheelhouse.
That was it. Yeah. And there were some changes internally for the place that I was working for, and it just provided the right kind of, I guess, opportunity for me to jump out on my own. And so this May, Stages of Change Center will be 13 years old. So I've been doing this for 13 years. Thanks. And it still feels like brand new to me because I'm still just as energized at the opportunity to meet people where they are and to work with them and to talk to them about, what their capacity is within the situation that brought them in. Because there is a sense of crisis and powerlessness that one is feeling when they come through my doors. And so helping to hold the space for them to get a sense of just feeling balanced again, to be able to kind of look with clarity and move forward has been just awesome. I love the work that I do.
Yeah, and I didn't know about your background kind of in corrections. That's something actually we share. I have a lot of more interest academically in terms of the prison system, but in 2016 I volunteered to teach mindfulness in a prison. It was in Wisconsin at the time, but seeing the conditions, these were men in solitary confinement, kind of like your inspiration, the downstream. I mean, this is really as bad a place as you can be in solitary confinement, that kind of thing. And it really mobilized me. I moved to Minnesota, obviously, after that, but it's like, okay, I got to teach this stuff wherever I can get a chance, because it was so inspirational to see people in a situation so bad, but they can still learn, right? You can still educate them. So what was your inspiration for specifically focusing more on alcohol moderation rather than, the abstinence only kind of approach, cold turkey?
Well, because one of the things that I recognized early on in teaching the education to people was that they want themselves to be able to self-correct. There is a desire for that, an innate desire. It's that feeling that you're supported in that. And when you come in and you start the conversation with, it's time for you to acknowledge that you're powerless, you're taking so much of the energy out of that person, right? To say, wait, I think I can do something. And now you're sitting in a situation with someone who is dependent on you to basically, figure this out for them. And the reality of it is that when we empower them and we don't activate their rebellion in the process, it's amazing how just giving people that respect enough to sit with them and say, okay, let's explore all the possibilities for you here.
Right.
And then let's look at your life and your needs, and let's put a plan together that you are a part of, crafting that is reasonable for you. And that's why that client-centered approach for me is so important, because I'm a clinician and I do this every day. And yes, I feel pretty confident in, being able to kind of understand what's going on. But the details of one's life and the ways that each person, feels empowered, or different things that they have to have in place in order to kind of have that restoration of confidence and stuff, they have to be a part. They have to be a part of it, and they have to feel a confidence to be able to do it. So one of the things that I took on a long time ago was, basically assuming that they were capable of making the changes. And that's the approach that I take with them, is like, there's victims here. Right. You are in a position to make changes should you decide that you're willing to do the work to do so.
Yeah. I did a lecture last week on the approach. Obviously, I'm in more of the psychotherapy domain. You're more in the evaluation and educational space. But I just call it Zen therapy. What I do, and I was explaining to them, is I don't know what the person's problem is. They know what their problem is, and I just ask them what they want to change about themselves. And what that allows in terms of a therapeutic relationship is, it's like, my chair isn't taller than your chair. It's like, I'm not superior. Yeah, I've been doing this for many, many years like yourself, but in terms of building a relationship, if you're putting them in kind of a one down position, it is that powerlessness. At the same time, the relationship is one of dependency, right? They're dependent on us to kind of make these changes. But then once they take that environmental support, which is the therapy, the treatment, then they have self-support. They do it on their own. And it sounds like both of us use a contract specifically. You want to talk about how you create that plan with the client?
Yeah. Well, depending on the services, right? Some of my clients are referred to me because they've had an incident. Maybe they've gotten a DWI, or maybe they've had a domestic incident, or, some kind of altercation, and they're facing some legal charges. That's typically how my client is going to come to me. But the fact of the matter is like, yes, I understand that they've got a thing to resolve, right? They need an assessment, they need a class, or they need to do some individual coaching, or something of that nature. And so we want to first address the need that they come in with, right? But the opportunity that is there too is to say, okay, let's not just get you a certificate. Let's explore the possibility of something more. And one of the best ways
it's not just a participation trophy for
yeah,
showing up. It's
exactly.
It's like, actually going to do something.
And I want to go back really quick to what you just said about having that conversation about, hey, listen, like, I'm not sitting in a position that I'm better than you or anything like that.
Yeah.
One of the things I say in my classes, well, I used to say it when I was downtown teaching classes, I'd say the only thing that separates us is tables and chairs, because we're all humans here.
Exactly.
We're all just trying to figure life out, and we're trying to make progress, and we're trying to just do the best we can. And how can I support you in being able to, that whole adage, like, as soon as you know better, do better, right? And like, what can I provide to you that helps you with that? But I always tell the client, I'm going to give you everything I've got to help facilitate that change process. But the decision to change is always up to you. And the thing that I focus on with my clients is, when they come in, I first understand, like, let's address what they're here for, which is, let's get you the programming that you need. But then I'm going to make sure that that programming is like piled high with all the things that you would need to contemplate. Maybe there's something more here, right? So sometimes I have clients that are very short term. They're coming for a specific thing. And what I do is I just give them everything I got within the context of that thing.
Yeah.
But I've had this many times too, where clients will come back to me and say, Angel, your class was really good. It got me thinking about stuff, and I'd like to come meet with you personally, and I'd like to explore these things.
That's more the coaching side
That's
of it.
more the coaching side of it. And so I just try to create an environment for my clients to be able to start challenging their own thinking about things, and then having that rapport and trust with me where they're like, I think she actually understands, or she gets it.
Yeah.
And then once they come back, that process, we sit down together and I go, okay, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Let's understand. Because to me, drinking is not the problem. The drinking is a symptom of something that's going on. And if we can identify what that is, and to be honest, working with my clients over the years, the three main things that my clients will tell me is driving misuse or abuse of alcohol has to do with stress, boredom, or their social network. And so, okay, let's start there, right? And when you start kind of understanding, like, these are the three areas that they need to figure out how to navigate a little bit better, okay, we put that plan in place. But the plan, you always understand that beneath the stress, the boredom, or the social networks, there's another layer. And I want to try to help them get to that place.
Because you can't change anything by keeping your life the same.
Exactly.
Right? It's like just fit it in. So you have to develop some kind of a plan. I focus a lot on my patients making a decision, like a new kind of decision, not based on how they were as a kid or their parents' upbringing in terms of what that changes. What you're describing in terms of the rapport with the client. You have to vibe with the therapist or instructor, however it's defined. Otherwise, you're not going to be intimate with them. You're not going to share things. In transactional analysis, that's the method I use in therapy. The saying is, I'm okay, you're okay. Yeah. So when the person comes in, like we were talking about, I'm not better than them. Like, I have problems too. I'm not going to talk about them necessarily with them at that moment, but it's like we're the same. Yeah. And, when I was doing that lecture last week, one of the questions was, well, isn't this approach too kind of heady, too cognitive? It's like, I think that's putting people in a lower position. I mean, if they have brain damage or some kind of developmental issue, they might not be able to understand these concepts. But with transactional analysis, the emphasis is get well, analyze later. So forget about how it all started. It's like you're talking about, what's your social network right now? How much stress do you have? Like, these are the immediate things in your environment that you can make changes in. But that idea that, we all struggle, I try to convey that as a therapist. Like, I'm just a real person. My Zen teacher would say, we're all messy miracles. It's like, we're sort of perfect the way we are, but we can make changes and improve. So maybe you're already kind of speaking to this, but talk more about how stages of change is different from the kind of abstinence-based Alcoholics Anonymous model. Yeah.
Well, the first thing is, I don't tell anybody not to drink. And I don't tell anybody not to use. That, to me, that is the quickest way to activate someone's rebellion. And my thing is that I want to keep that space between us safe. And I want it to feel like, okay, she's not coming in here with a set of orders for me.
Exactly.
She's coming in here and she wants to have a conversation with me that allows me to navigate am I going to continue drinking, or do I feel that abstinence is best, and do I have the tools that I need in order to support that decision? And I love that you talked about that, like, make a decision, right? Because most people, the struggle that they live in is in the indecision itself.
Exactly.
It's the knowing that I need to do something different, but but they are just not fully committed to the change that's necessary, right?
There's overthinking.
There's overthinking. And
Yeah.
so what I feel is that my role is to come into that space with them. So I meet them right there. And I don't tell them, in order to get better, you're going to have to come over here, you know, because I just don't think that invites them into the experience to be a part of the solution, you know. And so one of the differences in my work is that I meet them where they are. I do not say to them, if you come over here, we can start this process. Now, I will give them the best strategy to move things forward. But if it takes us a week or a month to get to that place, we're there.
It's based on their motivation.
Yep, it's
right?
their motivation. And beyond their motivation, if they're not moving on something, then that's where I can come in and say, all right, what do we need to introduce? What other idea, what other tool, what other technique, what else is needed here to help inspire this person to make that next step, or to take that step, right? Because once a decision is made, everything after that is just step work, right? Everything after that. And so I would say that for us, the work that we're doing that is the most important for our clients is the one that says, I'll come right into this space with you that you're just kind of contemplating and you don't know exactly yet how or if you're ready to go. And we'll keep nurturing that until you're ready to make that. Just because once the decision's made, it's usually, okay, Angel, like just get just get out of the way and let them keep going.
Yeah,
right?
and I mean that's an obvious bias that we have as people, you know, creating interventions for people in what is technically, you know, healthcare. And so that bias is that we want them to get well. I mean, you can't hide that. But how you get there is not up to us. I mean, I'll help you think about it and guide you, but you tell me what you want to do. And I joke with people when they first come in. I mean, if you say you want to grow a third arm, like, I'm not going to be able to help you do that. But if you want to quit smoking, or you want to get into a new relationship, that kind of thing. One of the things that struck me that Eric Byrne wrote about, he's the founder of transactional analysis, and I've talked in other episodes a little bit about game analysis, but he said drugs are instead of other people. And when I first got into psychotherapy, I was working with a lot of people with addiction, and we had this continuum. It was just like a piece of paper, and it was basically your relationship. I'm sure you're familiar with this, your relationship to the substance. It's like, what kind of relationship do you want to have? Do you want to be sort of married with kids with this alcohol or cannabis or whatever? Do you want to be sort of dating, flirting with it, you know, more control versus I can't live without you? And it was very visual. Like, I could say, where do you see yourself now on it? Where do you want to be? So again, it's not me saying, here's what you need to do, but it's like, what's going on now is not helping you get well. It's helping you get worse.
Right. No, that's so important, because I equate it to a relationship all the time, because I tell my clients, I'm like, listen, you are in relationship to everything in this world. And you have to sort of explore the relationship with chemicals the same way you explore your relationship to your job, to your spouse, to your, you know, to your friends. Because the reality of it is, what I have found is that most people will evaluate the things that they're involved in this life periodically, right? Is this house the right size, or is this car going to meet our needs? And if it's time to, you know, usher it out, they figure that out, they take the steps, and they move forward, right? Very few people will take the time to evaluate their relationship with alcohol or marijuana or anything like that.
Why think about it?
Why think about it, right? And what happens is they create patterns as young people who don't have anything to lose. They're not trying to have something else and it. So the pattern that they create with the substance and the relationship that they forge with it is one that you'll usually see when misuse and abuse starts to become problematic. It's because that relationship has not been reevaluated to determine if the way in which you're bringing it into your life is putting other things that you're now trying to cultivate at risk.
Right, you're losing your job
right.
or your driver's license.
Yeah, and so a lot of times it's just taking the time to do the work to explore the relationship with it and to make new decisions about it, replace the belief patterns and or the beliefs so that you can amend the patterns, right?
Yeah.
And so the moderation management coaching for me is something that really has just taken off in the last few years because I started to recognize that there's a large group of people in and around who they want to explore the possibility of what does it look like to have a relationship with alcohol where it don't feel like it's putting any of the other areas of my life at risk. And so I take people through a program. I have like a 6-step reset that I walk people through. And I've been met with some questions about I don't know, is that really an okay way to work with people? But I tell people, I'm like, listen, 30% of people who go through my program ultimately decide that abstinence is their best course.
Oh, okay.
But they would not get there without the opportunity to explore that for themselves because they don't know that it's okay to let go of it sometimes or that it's okay to let it be different for them. And you're so right about that analogy of like it's the instead of. Because what I understand is that everyone just wants a connection. And if they can't make a connection, then they cope with not being able to connect. And alcohol and drugs make for an seemingly excellent alternative, right? If you're looking to feel a little bit more at ease or a little bit more, just okay with the way things are, I tell people as a coping strategy, drugs and alcohol are 100% effective because they give you what it is that you're wanting in that moment. It's the consequence, the baggage that comes along with that usually starts to take things.
The anxiety goes down in the moment, but then you have these other issues that are potentially coming up. So let's get into kind of the services that you have at Stages of Change, but maybe starting from, somebody's listening to this podcast right now, speak to them. How would they know if they should head over to your website or refer a friend or something, and then walk me through what those steps are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer kind of a variety of things, and so the first layer of my services usually comes down to, have you gotten into some kind of a legal infraction, a DWI situation, or maybe you've had a domestic incident recently, or maybe an assault charge or something of that nature. And from that, you're facing some legal consequences. This is where people usually start with me. This is how they find me, but not always. But that's usually the first layer. So I offer assessments, domestic violence assessments,
because a lot of times
anger
it's
management.
required either from work or the legal system.
Yeah, and so my primary referrals are coming from attorneys and probation officers, and then also employers, like you said. So those are the first layer. Education services, if you've got to do a class for something, I probably offer the class that you need. And then obviously the assessing and the evaluation process. The second thing that I do is the individual coaching. I do a relapse prevention program, which is typically for someone if they've been through treatment before and they've had a lapse. Maybe it's not a full-blown something, but they've just kind of fallen back in, and we want to kind of come back, and we want to rewrite our relapse program. They just need that little bit more support to get back into their recovery process. So I offer that for people. In addition to that, I do actual moderation management coaching. I actually have a client right now who is about 3 months into working with me, and he's just doing phenomenal. And that was what he came to me for. He found my website, and he said, "Hey, I'm interested in this," and so we started working together a few months ago. And this is just something that it's kind of exciting for me because I've had clients that I've worked with in this capacity over the years, but it's now I'm just sort of embracing that, and I'm saying, no, I think there's something here. And this individual that just started with me, he read the website and he said, that's what I'm looking for. And so I'm like, okay. So it's across the board coaching to meet the need of the person. If they're looking to intentionally abstain, I've got the licensing and the background to help them work through a program. If they are looking to explore moderation management, I also have the background and can help them with that. So it's a little bit of, there's just that, there's usually a gap between they don't need anything, no services, and they need treatment. And my goal is to fill that continuum with options for clients to be able to get what they need and get back to life.
And because all your services are virtual, online, I assume you could have a potentially pretty big reach, like anybody in Minnesota can contact you, and that doesn't, I guess that makes it easier for people. They don't have to drive or maybe skip less work and that sort of thing. So when you're talking about setting up this plan with people in the different options, maybe could you give an example of a Jane Doe, like how that stepwise process actually works?
Yeah.
Like, are they coming in weekly? Are they coming in, multiple times a week? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, if they do an education class is what we would consider brief and targeted. So for alcohol and drug education per se, you could do 1 week of classes all the way up to 5 weeks of classes if you're doing my online live Zoom class. But I also just recently created an on-demand version of that. So because one of the things is for exactly what you're talking about. It's the barrier for a lot of people to getting the time in to be able to do it, right? If somebody has a legal situation come up, they're already having a lot of barriers placed, right? Their license is restricted, so their mobility is restricted. They're already paying a lot of money, probably to get rides places, things like that. So all my services,
about stress on top of the
stress
issue,
on top of the stress, right?
Yeah.
And so this going online has really created an opportunity for a lot of my clients to be able to get the services, right? Nothing works if they can't get in front of it. You're not going to get change if people can't get to the thing that they're supposed to go do, right?
Yeah.
So having all of my services online now has afforded me the opportunity to go beyond the borders of Blue Earth County. That is primarily where my business has been for the last 13 years.
Yeah.
But when COVID hit, I went exclusively online, and I just haven't looked back because my reach now is I can reach someone who is sitting in Reading, Minnesota, and has, a 2-hour drive before they can ever actually meet with a clinician. And so that's one of the benefits that I saw immediately happen. So I do everything online. I have a mix of on-demand options and live options. When I'm doing coaching with a client, that is always like a Zoom-based meeting because there does need to be that, face-to-face. We do need to be able to create that connection and that relationship to one another as we're working together. And so for that piece of it, people are signing in and meeting with me. And we go through, when I'm doing my plans for people, if they're doing a class, that's the plan. They're going to do the class.
Yeah.
And then there's always the opening. If you would like to come back, because at that point it's their choice if they want to come back and do services. But if they make a decision to work with me, doing like a coaching or moderation management or relapse prevention, we're going to sit down and we're going to basically go through it like an intake process. And I want to understand what the need is, and I will create kind of like a treatment plan, is what I guess people would probably most understand. But to me, sometimes I just call it, what's our plan? What's your plan? Yeah. And that plan is like, what are the things that need to change in order for you to accomplish the goal that you said you have here? And then we have markers, right? So I tell my clients, I'm not here to work with you indefinitely. I want to make sure that you get what you need in a time frame and get the practice going so that you can get out there and get back to life and start filling it with the things that bring purpose, meaning, and value.
And I'm sure this is true for you. When people contact me by phone, like looking to start up therapy services, the first thing they say is, do you have a wait list? How soon can I get in? And you can get in pretty quickly with me. Is that the case for your process as well? Yeah,
I have openings every week for assessments, unless it's a big week, and sometimes
Christmas.
It might be a couple weeks. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's seasons, right, that we go through. But generally within the week, people can get in and connect with me. And usually if they call me and they say, hey, listen, I'd like to do some coaching, or I'd like to do some work with you, I usually take the time right then. And I say, okay, help me understand what it is, because I want to make sure that I'm referring them to the right thing, or that I'm the right fit for them. And if I'm not, I'm all too ready to help navigate for them and say, I think you would be better fit to maybe, give a call to Andrew. Like, so this would be more his forte, or, and I provide that information. Because to me, at the end of the day, I just want people to get what they need. And if I am not the one to provide it, then it's my responsibility, I think, as a professional.
Such a prejudice of yours that you want people to get better.
I just want people to
have
get
a
better.
good life.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think that it's I see all of us and all the services that are out here. We're all here with a shared and common goal, right? It's just that each one of us has a different area in which we are stronger, or that, our services are intended, for a certain type of client. And so if I am not the one, I'm going to make sure you get connected to the one.
Well, it speaks to what you were saying before about our interconnectedness, is that we're interdependent, and a kind of mature way of thinking about interdependence is you have to be dependent on people when it's appropriate. You got to be independent when it's appropriate. And as a simple kind of adage, people tend to be hyper independent, they were scripted to be very independent, or they're very dependent, a symbiotic or codependent process with people. And you really have to have both. And with the therapy, like we're describing, is no, in the beginning, it's a symbiotic process. Like we're going to set up the contract, the planning, it's going to be your goals. But as you get well, then just like we both have kids, right? You want them to leave. Leave me. When you're ready. Same thing with therapy is like, I'm not going to tell you when to stop. You're not going to tell me when to stop. We're going to have this plan together. And that outlines it in detail. This is when we're going to stop. With psychotherapy, I say, well, you might want to come up with another plan, and we might be working on different things. I'm curious, and I think the audience would be interested in kind of common misperceptions about alcohol addiction or abuse, or can you speak to that a little bit?
I think it's the idea that if you are misusing it, then that's it. You have to stop. You can't continue. There's no option for moderation to happen. And I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions, because when I talk to people, the continuum of services, right, is usually nothing or treatment. And so, and the lingo is there, right? It's black and white. And what I say to people is, I don't think in the area of substance abuse that we can afford to just have a black and white approach. Everything is shades of gray. And what my responsibility is to make sure that if I'm meeting with the client, that I see them where they are, not where I project that they're headed. Right? And so I can understand that as humans, we're always trending in a certain direction. So if you're going in the right direction, you're probably going to keep going in the right direction. But if you're trending in the wrong direction without something sort of stopping the pattern and creating a new pattern, most likely the problems are going to persist, right? And so what I think is hardest is for people to sort of be willing to arrest the idea that it has to be all or nothing. Just to allow for the opportunity for us to find out.
It's like that rebelliousness. This is like, I'm not an alcoholic. It's like, well, if you're starting from that, like then we're arguing about what color the sky is versus it's like, no, just tell me what you want to do to change. If you have a legal issue, well, you're going to have to solve that, but we're not the sort of experts. One of the things I remember about when we were both in the Profinium building that I loved so much was our kind of political conversations. And we weren't really coming from, I'm right, you're wrong. We were just kind of describing how we were seeing the world. And I think we could get into this maybe in future podcasts, but one of the things I focus on with my psychotherapy patients is what's called the script. And the script is basically a programming in your head based on early childhood decisions. And this is a life plan. So you got a dad that's an alcoholic. Guess what? You turn into an alcoholic. But one of the examples of the script is called a joylessness script. And that's where we're just our heads and we're de-emphasizing the body. And so as kids, oftentimes their parents, didn't want them to experience pleasure and discounted pain. It's like, you're fine, you're not hurt. But so we might go in that direction because what I haven't heard many people, especially clinicians, talk about with drug and alcohol issues is like, why are so many people in the United States using drugs so much? It's like stepping back is like, because it's different than other, I don't know the numbers, but the joylessness scripting is, it's all work and no play. So you got to work all week and then on Friday or Saturday you can play. And I tell people it's like, no, you got to play every day to be well. And with that joylessness scripting, because we're kind of programmed that we're just our heads, you know, this is on mind, this is a conversation of mine, but we're full-bodied, relational beings. And so that kind of scripting is the person discounts their own feelings. So for example, when somebody comes in, I had an individual a year ago come in and they wanted to quit smoking cigarettes. And I didn't say, okay, let's go to half a pack. And then it's like, okay, well, before we even, because they said they got into the black and white thinking. It's like, okay, I got to go cold turkey. And it's like, well, no, I mean, the sort of child part of you that likes the nicotine is not going to want to go cold turkey. That's a more rational kind of thing. But I invite them, okay, the next time you're having a cigarette, just notice what's happening in your body. Notice the anticipation, the craving to have a cigarette. But then inevitably, the patient comes back and says, well, yeah, I was smoking a cigarette and I realized it really hurt my lungs. It's like, it didn't feel good because a lot of people are using it as a stress issue, a state change, you know, in their mind, that they don't focus on the body. And it's like, a lot of these drugs, they actually don't feel good, you know. And so then when that person has that experience, which I didn't tell them that was the experience they would have, then they're taking a totally different look at it. It's like they're actually being more mindful and getting into their body. Like, what does it feel like in your body? Because, you know, like you were talking about earlier, it is based on that childhood experiences and adaptations. If you're told not to feel your feelings, then guess what? You grow up and not feeling your feelings, including just the physiology of what's happening. And I think just that orientation, you know, we're talking about the abstinence-based versus kind of smart recovery models, you know, moderation models. I think that kind of points us to, you know, the stigma around, I think it's even more for drug and alcohol stuff than mental health at this point. But maybe can you talk about, if you want to respond to that, but also just like the stigma around this, getting the services, getting that first foot in the door?
Yeah, well then that's the hardest part, right? So to be honest, the majority of my clients are high functioning, successful people in our community that are silently struggling because there's that fear of actually reaching out, because I don't want to be labeled an alcoholic. I don't want to, you know, for someone to start, you know, telling me that I, you know, have this issue. I'm already struggling with understanding that something's not right, but I don't want that typecast. I don't want someone to just basically just look at me and say, oh, okay, you're an alcoholic now, and now I've got to go explain this to people, and how, you know, and there's a fear then that keeps the silence going, right? And the isolation,
the secret alive.
And you're, you know, like the saying, you're only as sick as your secrets, right? But the thing is like, how do you create a space that's safe enough for people to come out and to say, so hey, I'm a little worried about this, and not have the other person just jump right in and go, okay, well, here we go. You know, you can't drink anymore. You got to stop your drinking, because the drinking isn't the problem. If you heal the person, a lot of times the drinking moderates itself, or you know, the person comes to a conclusion that, again, it's not serving me. And it's funny because I just had this with my client that I'm working with on moderation management. He said, you know, I started to think the other day, what is the real purpose of doing this if I'm just having a couple? Do I even find it worth it anymore? And I said, okay, well, let's talk about that, right? But he came to that conclusion on his own because the space that he was in was safe enough to explore those thoughts and to say it out loud without feeling like someone
that's the
was
space
again
you created because it's a client-centered model. Do you want to maybe say a few words about that?
Yeah, so that client-centered model is essentially just, again, it's like saying, I'm going to meet you where you are right now, and I'm going to try to understand, right? Seek first to understand. The clinician in all of us, I think, wants to help, wants people to get better and all of those things. But even after doing this for 25 years, you know, I don't know everything about everything. I know a little bit about a little bit. I'm super passionate about it. But at the end of the day, every single person has their own set of details, their own set of needs and uniqueness that, has brought about the situation that they're in. And so what I try to do with them is just to say, okay, I want to understand your details, and I want to explore, with you, what is your ultimate goal? How do you see this thing going? And one of the exercises I do with my clients that is funny how a little inhibited they feel about doing it is, I said, okay, I want you to create like a vision board type of thing, right? I want you to draw a picture of what you would like alcohol to look like in your future. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are very apprehensive to do that. And I said, why is that so hard for you? What is it that what is it that makes you hesitate, right? So these are one of the things that I do, because I'm like, you have to change your perception of this thing, right? Because perception is reality. But when you want to actually do something different, you got to amend the perspective because the perspective is what's driving the perception, right? So if we can just pull back and I can say, well, what would it look like for you? How would you like this to look? The client then has an opportunity to write a visual of something or create a visual of something that looks more in alignment with how they want. Because I'm like, where the mind goes, we're all going to follow, right? That's how it is. So the mindfulness, I love that idea of the mindfulness practice. It's like, well, just take notice of what's going on in your body. Ask yourself, like, as you're doing this, come back to yourself for a minute and say, why am I trying to mildly disconnect right now? Or what is the need that I have that I can't get met in this moment? So I'm looking to...
And we haven't even talked about social media and scrolling.
So,
A client this morning was just talking about how they're working with this, but like it's so habitual.
Yes.
And that's kind of with any kind of contract therapeutic one. It's like, what is the habits? What keeps happening? I'm really excited to continue talking more about how this is a relational problem, like the drug or the drinking itself isn't necessarily the problem. I can't wait to talk to you more about this game analysis stuff, because when Eric Berne started understanding, what we call quote unquote, alcoholics, he was not convinced that it was a brain kind of issue. Right. He said, well, maybe there's something in brain, genetic. This is in the 1950s. But he said the cure, the quote unquote cure for alcoholism was not abstinence. He said it was learning how to drink socially. So you don't crash your car, get, pulled over, that kind of thing. And it seems like your client-centered approach is really, okay, develop insight into how you're perceiving things, and that's both based on your cultural conditioning, including all the Budweiser commercials and everything else, and telling you what's sort of right and wrong, and that puts you into action. One of the other things that I don't think many people realize is with alcohol kind of abuse specifically, again, the way Eric Berne saw it was, it's not the alcohol that's really like the thing that is really I don't want to say pleasurable, but like the emotional kind of payoff to it is not the actual intoxication, but it's the next day hangover. Yes. And so you ask people about, okay, you drank 20 drinks on Friday, what happened on Saturday? Well, in their head, they're very critical of themselves, and they feel like a victim, and then maybe they do something a little more exaggerated. I'm not going to drink for a month or something, but that doesn't change the patterns, right? And the insight. So we'll definitely get into that space in future conversations. We'll have opportunities for that, but maybe just take a minute to sum up, what you want to say about Stages of Change, what you want to speak to people, and then how they can connect with you the best way.
I think that the first thing is, if you find yourself in a situation, or if a client finds themselves in a situation where they need to get an evaluation or participate in a class, or even if you're just having some general questions, my invite is just give me a call. Like, give me a call. Let's talk about it, right? I love to talk. You ask any of my friends, right?
You're easy to talk to.
Thank you. And that's the first thing is, like, I'm not going to try to sell anybody on anything. I want to be the resource that you need in the moment, right? So reaching out on my website, you can find me on some social media channels. I like to do some reels and things, different little things here and again that just give little tips and tools. And even if they're not in need of it because they don't have a legal thing, go ahead and visit my website and just get some information. We're making some changes
like you're
to
saying,
it right now.
on the surface level, many of your clients are quote unquote successful,
Yes.
in our
Yes.
society, but that doesn't mean you can't examine what you're
Exactly.
doing. I mean, a therapy now, it's tied to this concept of mental health, and so then it's like, okay, this person has ADHD or depression. That's gonna make you go into services versus like maybe you're just curious
Yeah.
about what's happening for you and then want to
Yeah.
talk to somebody that actually knows this space. And for me, it's like we can benefit from analyzing those decisions we made in childhood that create the perceptions and the identity. Is like if you're like, I'm never going to be like my mom who was an alcoholic,
Right.
well, you're just rebelling against that,
Yeah.
and then you're going to be
Yeah.
addicted to work or
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
something else. So really excited to continue having this conversation with you.
So
But
good.
thanks so much for visiting with me, and stay tuned. We'll see you soon.